The Soul of the Samurai, The Legacy of the Japanese Sword. Dawn breaks over feudal Japan. The morning mist parts to reveal two silhouettes facing each other, their hands hovering over sword hilts. In an instant, steel flashes in the golden light, and one warrior falls. This is not a scene from your favorite samurai movie. This was reality in medieval Japan, where a single sword stroke could write history. The Japanese sword, perhaps humanity's most perfect killing instrument, was more than a weapon. It was the soul of the samurai, a bridge between life and death, and the physical embodiment of an entire philosophical system. But it took legendary duels to forge this mystique, battles where steel met steel and ideals clashed with devastating consequences. Picture this. You're standing on a wind-swept island, waves crashing against rocky shores. The year is 1612, and you're about to witness one of the most famous duels in history. But this is no ordinary fight. It's a battle of minds as much as blades, where one warrior will arrive deliberately late, wielding nothing but a wooden sword carved from a boat oar. The story of Japanese swordsmanship is often misunderstood in the West. While Hollywood portrays samurai as simply skilled fighters, the reality was far more complex. These warriors were philosophers, artists, and guardians of an intricate code of honor. Their duels were not mere tests of strength. They were ceremonies where life, death, and the very essence of Bushido hung in the balance. Today we'll witness three legendary duels that didn't just end in victory or defeat. They fundamentally changed how Japan understood the art of the sword. These encounters would influence martial arts for centuries to come, and their echoes can still be felt in modern cinema, from Star Wars lightsaber battles to the choreographed dance of modern action films. Our first duel takes us to that windswept island I mentioned, Ganryujima. Here, two of Japan's greatest swordsmen would meet in a contest that has captured imaginations for 4 centuries. Miyamoto Musashi versus Sasaki Kojiro. This wasn't just a clash of steel. It was a battle between opposite philosophies of the sword. Sasaki Kojiro was everything you'd expect from a samurai master. Elegant, sophisticated, and lethal with his oversized Nodachi sword, he was known as the Demon of the Western Provinces. His signature technique, the turning swallow cut, was said to be so swift it could strike a bird in mid-flight. He represented the classical tradition of swordsmanship, precise, beautiful, and deadly. Miyamoto Musashi, on the other hand, was his perfect antithesis. Unkempt, eccentric, and seemingly unconcerned with samurai traditions, he was more interested in effectiveness than elegance. While other warriors spent fortunes on fine swords, Musashi often fought with wooden weapons. He believed that the path to mastery lay not in perfecting established techniques, but in transcending them entirely. The stage for their encounter was set through a series of carefully orchestrated events. Musashi, already famous for never losing a duel, accepted Kojiro's challenge, but employed psychological warfare from the start. He deliberately arrived hours late to the island, knowing it would unsettle his opponent who had been waiting in the hot sun. When Musashi's boat finally appeared on the horizon, observers noted something strange. He had carved a crude wooden sword from one of the boat's oars during the journey. This was either madness or supreme confidence. Facing one of Japan's greatest swordsmen with nothing but a piece of shaped wood. The tension on the island was palpable. Kojiro, his patience worn thin by the long wait, drew his famous long sword as Musashi approached. The contrast between them couldn't have been starker. Kojiro in his finery, wielding his gleaming blade, versus Musashi in simple clothes with his wooden weapon. What happened next would be debated for centuries. As Kojiro moved to attack, Musashi's crude wooden sword found its mark first. Some say the longer reach of the boat or sword gave Musashi the advantage. Others claim it was the psychological warfare that had already won the battle before it began. What's certain is that Kojiro fell, his skull crushed by the wooden weapon, while Musashi returned to his boat without a scratch. This duel would become more than just a famous victory. It would symbolize a revolutionary idea in Japanese martial arts, that true mastery transcends the tools and trappings of tradition. Musashi's wooden sword proved that the weapon itself was secondary to the mind that wielded it. In the wake of this legendary encounter, Musashi would go on to write The Book of Five Rings, a text that continues to influence not just martial artists, but business strategists and military leaders to this day. His victory over Kojiro demonstrated that the way of the sword was not just about technical skill. It was about strategy, psychology, and the ability to see beyond conventional wisdom. But perhaps the most profound duel in samurai history left no blood on the ground. In fact, some say the most important sword fight in Japanese history never saw a blade drawn at all. This is the story of Yagyu Munenori and Kamiyazumi Nobutsuna, a duel that would shape the very philosophy of Japanese swordsmanship. The year was 1565, and Japan was in the midst of its turbulent Sengoku period, the age of warring states. In this era of constant conflict, two distinct philosophies of swordsmanship had emerged. One focused on the sword as the ultimate killing tool. The other saw it as a path to inner peace and enlightenment. These two worldviews were about to clash in a most unexpected way. Kamiyazumi Nobutsuna was already a legend. Known as the founder of the Shinkage Ryu style, he had revolutionized swordsmanship by introducing the concept of Satsujinto, the killing sword, and Katsujinto, the life-giving sword. But it was his encounter with a young, ambitious samurai named Yagyu Munenori that would change everything. Munenori came from a proud samurai family and had already made a name for himself as a fierce duelist. When he challenged Kamiyazumi, everyone expected another bloody spectacle. What they got instead was a masterclass in the deeper meaning of martial arts. As the two warriors faced each other in the training hall of Kamizumi's dojo, the atmosphere was electric. Munenori drew his sword and took his stance, ready to prove himself against the master. But Kamizumi did something unexpected. He smiled and sat down, laying his sword beside him. "Young warrior," he said, "before we cross swords, let me ask you something. What is the purpose of our art?" Munenori, taken aback, gave the traditional answer, "To defeat our enemies and serve our lords." Kamiyazumi nodded thoughtfully. "Then let me show you what decades of study have taught me about victory and defeat." What followed was not a clash of steel, but a demonstration that would transform Munenori's understanding forever. Kamizumi showed him how the highest form of swordsmanship wasn't about defeating an enemy. It was about preventing conflict from arising in the first place. Using a series of exercises and demonstrations, Kamizumi revealed how true mastery meant being so aware, so perfectly positioned, that no enemy would dare to attack. He showed how the subtle shift of weight, the angle of the blade, and even the direction of one's gaze could control a situation without violence. "The sword that kills," Kamiyazumi explained, "is crude and limited. But the sword that gives life, that prevents unnecessary death through superior skill and wisdom, this is the true pinnacle of our art." This philosophical duel had a profound effect on Munenori. He became Kamiyazumi's student on the spot, eventually developing these ideas into what would become the Yagyu Shinkage Ryu style, one of the most influential schools of swordsmanship in Japanese history. The implications of this encounter went far beyond martial arts. Munenori would go on to become the sword instructor to 3 successive Tokugawa shoguns, helping to shape the political and philosophical landscape of an entire era. His teachings emphasized that the greatest victory was the battle not fought, the conflict prevented through wisdom and awareness. This bloodless duel between Kamizumi and Munenori represents a crucial evolution in samurai culture. the transformation of swordsmanship from a mere killing art into a path of spiritual and philosophical development. It's particularly relevant today as we grapple with questions of conflict resolution and the true meaning of strength. The principles they explored that day would later be captured in Munenori's classic text, The Life-Giving Sword, which argues that true strategy lies in preventing conflict rather than winning fights. This idea would influence Japanese martial arts and philosophy for centuries to come. Think about this. While Hollywood often portrays samurai as warriors seeking glorious death in battle, the reality was far more nuanced. These master swordsmen were developing principles of conflict prevention and peaceful resolution centuries before modern concepts of diplomatic negotiation. In fact, many of the ideas discussed during this philosophical duel find echoes in modern conflict resolution theory. The concept of controlling a situation through presence and awareness rather than force is now taught in everything from business negotiations to international diplomacy. This transformation of martial arts from pure combat to philosophical pursuit would help lay the groundwork for modern Japanese martial arts, where the focus is often more on personal development than fighting ability. The influence can be seen in modern dojos worldwide, where students begin and end each practice with meditation and philosophical discussion. Our final duel takes us into the realm of what many considered impossible: the creation of a perfect single killing stroke. This is the story of Ito Itosai, the founder of the one-sword school, and a duel that would give birth to one of Japan's most prestigious martial arts traditions. In the late 16th century, a young samurai named Ito Kagehisa was crossing the Kinu River by ferry. This ordinary journey would become the stuff of legend. Also on the ferry was a renowned swordsman of the Kashima school, known for his quick temper and eagerness to test his skills against worthy opponents. The senior swordsman, noting Ito's own carefully worn sword and confident bearing, began to provoke the younger warrior. As the ferry approached the opposite shore, the inevitable challenge was issued. But what happened next would change the course of Japanese martial arts forever. The duel itself lasted only a moment. As the two men faced each other on the riverbank, Ito executed a single perfect cut. The older swordsman fell, his own attack not even begun. This wasn't just speed or luck. Witnesses described it as if Ito had somehow moved between moments, striking in the space between seconds. This duel gave birth to the Ito Ryu, the one-sword school, and earned Ito his new name, Itosai, master of the single stroke. But the significance of this encounter goes far beyond its deadly outcome. It represented the culmination of an idea that had been developing in Japanese swordsmanship for centuries, the concept of the perfect cut. In an age where martial arts often emphasized complex techniques and elaborate combinations, Itosai proposed something revolutionary. Instead of learning thousands of techniques poorly, he advocated mastering a single perfect strike. This philosophy of Iken Hisatsu, one cut, certain death, would influence martial arts for centuries to come. The secret lay not in the technique itself, but in the mind behind it. Itosai's innovation was to understand that the perfect cut existed in the moment before physical movement began. By the time a sword was drawn, the battle was already decided. Itosai's legacy lived on through his school, which became one of the most prestigious in Japan. The Ito Ryu would later influence the development of modern kendo, the Japanese art of sword fighting that continues to be practiced worldwide today. His emphasis on mental preparation and absolute commitment to a single, decisive action would influence not just martial arts, but Japanese culture as a whole. The impact of these three duels, Musashi's victory through unconventional thinking, Kamizumi and Munenori's philosophical revelation, and Itosai's perfect strike, extends far beyond their historical moment. Together they represent three fundamental aspects of mastery: innovation, wisdom, and perfection. These encounters remind us that true martial arts are never just about fighting. They're about understanding ourselves, our capabilities, and the nature of conflict itself. The lessons learned on those distant battlefields and training grounds continue to resonate today, whether in modern martial arts, dojos, corporate boardrooms, or our daily lives. Modern martial artists often say that the greatest opponent we face is ourselves. This wisdom, forged in these historic duels, continues to guide practitioners around the world. Whether wielding a sword or facing life's daily challenges, the principles remain the same. Know yourself, understand your opponent, and strive for perfection in every action. As we close this exploration of these legendary encounters, remember that every time you see a lightsaber duel in Star Wars or a standoff in a Western, you're witnessing the distant echoes of these samurai masters and their profound understanding of strategy, psychology, and the art of combat. Thank you for joining us on this journey through these pivotal moments in martial arts history. If you've enjoyed this exploration of samurai culture and philosophy, please consider subscribing to our channel for more fascinating stories from Japanese history. Don't forget to hit that like button and share this video with anyone who might appreciate these timeless lessons from the way of the sword.